important things to note with the year-end process is that it is not reversible. So you have to make sure that everything is being done correctly before you you complete it. So if you're not confident that everything's being done 100%, we strongly recommend that you back up your database before starting the year-end process. And whilst it's not compulsory, it is strongly recommended that all the users are logged out of. It doesn't have to be all of GP. If you've got multiple companies, it's ideal if they're just logged out of the company that you're working on. They don't have to be, but it is recommended just to make sure that nothing that they're doing is interfering with your process. So what the year-end process actually does, it transfers all your current year GL transactions and moves them to history. And it also transfers your current P&L amounts and resets them to, all your P&L accounts, it resets them to 0 and allocates them to the retained earnings account for in your beginning balance for the new fiscal year. As for balance sheet accounts, it creates a balance brought forward for the new fiscal year. And you've also got the option to remove any inactive accounts with 0 balances whilst you're doing the year-end process. And you can also print out a year-end report. So there are a few, in line with a year-end, there are also some month-end procedures, which I'm sure most of you already have. For those of you who don't know, within GP, there's actually no official month-end procedures in GP. Everything that you normally do in terms of month-end is self-decided. So it's internal policies rather than any system requirements. In other words, if you come to the end of the month and then you transact in the next month, nothing will go wrong. The system won't crash or anything like that. But there are some recommended ones, of course. And one of them, especially when it comes to year-end as well, is to post all the batches relating to the year that you're about to close. And the menu for that is Tools, Routines, Master Posting. The other way you can get to it, I've just got GP open now, is if you go to the admin page and under Routines, you've got Master Posting there. And for some reason, it's taking a little while. My screen's taking a little while to load, but that's okay. That window will show you a list of all the batches that you need to post. Okay. The other thing that we're going to look at, the other thing that we recommend that you run are things called checklinks. Now what checklinks does is it checks all the data in all the tables that are stored behind the scenes and making sure that all the data that's within each of the tables corresponds to one another. All the data that's within the tables has things like primary keys and things like that if you know your database relationships. And if there's anything missing or damaged, the checklinks will try and restore or fix that information. Okay, so if you actually go into File, Maintenance, and Checklinks, we'll see if my GP starts to be, my GP behaves itself. Now it's deciding not to open up. Well, what I'll do is I'll just restart it. don't have to run checklinks for every single item in the list, just these key ones here. If you're not using project accounting, you don't need to run checklinks for project, which is in the list here. So the key ones are sales, purchasing, inventory, and financial. Again, not compulsory, but recommended that you do it in the order that you see on the screen now. So you start off with sales and then obviously finish up with financials. Now there's also another utility called reconcile. And despite its name, it doesn't refer to reconciling anything to general ledger or subledger versus general ledger. It actually means something else in this context. What reconcile does is, well, all the data that, whenever you post any transactions, the individual transaction data is stored in one table, and a lot of the totals, so month totals or year-to-date totals, are stored in another table. And what it does is it makes sure that everything, the sum of everything in the sum of all the details equals the total, and if they're not, then it adjusts the total. So reconcile does not change any transactional information like checklinks has the potential to. It only fixes totals if there's anything to fix. If you run, excuse me, if you run any of the reconcile utilities and that you get a blank report, that means that your data is clean and there were no adjustments to be made. So you'll see from the list that there are a number of reconcile utilities. There's one for each module. I'm not going to go through every single one of those at the moment, but I will obviously go through the actual year-end process. So when we talk about year-end processing, we're not just talking about the GL year-end processing. There's actually a process for all the sub-modules as well. So when I say I refer to sub-modules, I mean your sales, your financials, your purchasing, your inventory, and so on. So there's actually one for each. Okay, so the ones we are going to cover in this webinar are inventory, receivables, payables, and fixed assets. They're the 4 sub-ledgers we are going to look at before we get on to the big one, which is, of course, your general ledger. Okay, so when you do each of the year ends, they all reside under the routines area. So if you're looking within GP, and you can either go from tools, routines, find your sub-module, sub-ledger, and you've got your year-end close there, or you can use the area page and get to that as well. So there it is there. So the first one we're going to look at is the inventory. So before you do the year-end process, it's a good idea to post all the transactions for the year, run the reconcile. So the reconcile, again, I won't run it, but I'll show you where it is. All the reconciles are under the utilities area. Oops, I'm in the sales page. Let's go to the inventory. Where are you? There you are. And you've got reconcile, and you can run this here. If you are using the inventory module and you're selling physical stock, also recommended that you do one final stock take and post any of the adjustments. Now you're going to see this pre-year-end closing backup and post-year closing backup quite a bit in these slides. Now those backups are entirely up to you. For some of you, if you use the inventory module on a very small scale, you may find that doing back pre-year ends and post-year ends for any of the sub-ledgers overkill. If you feel that it's not worth doing so many backups because the process only takes less than a few minutes to run, and worst case scenario you can restore the original backup you did at the beginning, then you don't need to spend the time doing all these pre-year ends and post-year end backups. These are only recommended if you've got very, very large quantities or if your year-end process takes a very long time. So for some clients, doing the check links and the reconcile can take several hours. So doing a pre-year-end and a post-year-end becomes essential if there's any problems encountered, because then you don't have to go back to the very beginning. So those are not compulsory. They are purely purely up to you. And in terms of who does the backup, that's your IT who is responsible for that. So as a front-end user, that's not your concern. That's something you need to talk to your IT about. If you're both an IT person and a GP user, well, that's a big bonus for you. You've got a lot of control in that case. Okay, but I understand that most people aren't. So feel free to speak to your IT about doing that for you. It's not something that you need to do. They are responsible for backups and restores if required. Okay, so let's see what the actual year-end for inventory does. What you can actually do is remove, if they have a zero balance, of course, you can remove any discontinued items that you have in the system. So I've seen a lot of places where there's a company's got thousands of items, but 3/4 of them are discontinued. And the year-end process, if they have a zero balance, gets rid of them. So let's actually go to the year-end window, which is our under routines. Okay, so if you're using lot tracking, you can also remove any sold lot attributes. And you can also remove any sold receipts and cost change history. So, yeah, and you don't have to do it on the actual date of year end. You can nominate a cutoff date for that as well. Now, just talking about the date, this is a demo date, so excuse the odd date that it is. So what I would actually also recommend that you do is change your user date to be your actual year-end date, because I understand that no one's ever going to do the actual year-end process on the 30th of June or whatever your year-end date is. It's always going to be a few weeks, a few days, a few weeks, even a few months after. But the idea of changing the user date is that when it records when you do the process, it records a timestamp, and it just looks cleaner to see that the year-end was done on a 30 June date as opposed to in the middle of your new fiscal year. So that's what I'm going to do now. In my case, my calendar, my fiscal periods are set up as the same way as calendar. So I'm going to change mine to 31st of December. But if your year-end is 30 June, you would change it to 30 June. Now, the other thing that the year-end process does, for any FIFO or LIFO items, if you've got a standard cost field, it will update it to be equal to the same as current cost. So, of course, if you're using the standard costing method, obviously, as you buy and sell inventory, the actual cost of your inventory item fluctuates because the price may have increased or decreased throughout the year. So some people manually update it to reflect inflation and so on, but you can also rely on what the system shows as your current cost to update it for you. So if I just go into an item, just to make it visibly clear for you, this item here, the standard cost is 17 and the current cost is 16. So when I do the year end, it will update the standard cost to also be, in this case, we're lucky that the price is a little bit lower. So it's going to drop the standard cost back down to 16. Okay, so there's no report that gets printed when you do the year-end process for inventory. That's just something to be mindful of. And of course, if you're not using the inventory module, you don't need to do the year-end close for it. Okay. And if you're also only using the inventory module to list items, in other words, items where you're not tracking any stock or doing any stock takes, then you can get away with it if you don't do the year-end close. In fact, I'm going to take it a step further and say if you're not interested in removing discontinued items or sold receipts or anything like that, you can get away with it if, even if you are using the inventory module heavily, you can get away with it if you don't do the inventory year-end. So in summary, year-end processing for inventory is optional. Now the next sub-module that we're going to look at is receivables. So once again, the recommendation is to post all the batches that make up sales, your sales module. So under sales, you've got series post, and it should show you all the open batches there. If you've got any orders or quotes that haven't been transferred to invoices that will still need to be there after you do your year-end, that is fine. You don't have to get rid of them. You don't have to void them. You don't have to post or transfer them. They can stay in there, and you can transfer them to invoices after you do the year-end. So do not be concerned if you've got hundreds of open orders or quotes sitting in the series posting. Okay, so once again, we've got the pre-year-end closing and the post-year-end closing. I've touched on the purposes of that before, so I won't repeat myself there. The other thing that is recommended to do is to close the actual fiscal periods. So if we go back into GP and we go to the admin page, you've got the fiscal periods set up under company, and you can go in and, in this case, I'm going to be closing 2017. So if you want to make sure no one posts to this to any of these modules, you can close them. So there's one for each of the key modules, and the reason you've got this in addition to the year-end is because when you close a fiscal year, whether it's for financial, your general ledger, your sales or purchasing, GP entitles you to post to one previous historical year. But keeping these closed will prevent any users from doing that. So the idea of being able to post to one historical year is useful if you need to do audit adjustments, which in reality happens all the time. So you may want to close all the fiscal periods, but then keep the last one open for, say, your general ledger, so that if you have any adjustments that you need to post, then you can. And then afterwards you can just tick it. There's also another window for tax periods as well. Not as important as your fiscal periods setup, but if you want to close those as well to prevent any GST transactions posting to those periods, you can close those as well. Okay, so let's have a look at what's actually going to change when we do a receivables year-end close. There's a couple of inquiry windows that show you year-to-date and life-to-date information, and those will obviously get reset once you do your receivables year-end close. So if I go to, I'll show you one of the windows. So we're going to go to our sales page, and we'll go to one of our inquiries, and there is a debtor summary. There's also, which is a better, I might show you actually a yearly summary. This one's probably a better example. So if we look at the moment and take a look at this first debtor, you see that you've got year-to-date, last year, and life-to-date. So of course, once you do the year-end close, your year-to-date is obviously going to be reset to 0. And it's going to move whatever you've got in year-to-date to last year, and then life-to-date is going to be updated as well with the sum of the two, plus any older years as well, of course. So you've also got one for a period summary, and this will also be reset. And there's a couple of other inquiry windows as well. So it does mention some SmartList items are also affected by the year-end close and by their fiscal year-end. What that means, if we look, say, at if we just look at our sales SmartList, and we go to customers, there are some year-to-date and life-to-date columns. Let's see if we can find any. Okay. Okay, yes, here we go. We've got total sales live-to-date, total sales year-to-date. So, of course, all these columns, they'll especially the year-to-date, of course, they'll be all reset to 0 once you do the year-end close. Now, once again, if you're not using the receivables module, which is rare, but I have seen it, if you're not using it, don't worry about doing the year-end. And again, if you're not using those particular inquiry windows or those fields in your SmartList, and you use external reports, or you use your detailed SmartList and do your own sums, or if you use it completely different methods to what I've just shown you in those inquiries. If you're not using any of them, once again, you can get away with it if you don't do the year-end for receivables. You get away with it. It won't hurt you. So that the routine resides over here under year-end close, and you'll notice that it's actually got two options, or three. You can do everything. You can do a financial year-end close, and you can do a calendar year-end close, because that, of course, affects certain year-to-date and calendar year-to-date fields. So if your fiscal year is not the same as your calendar year, you actually, technically speaking, would do this process every 6 months. If you're lucky and your calendar year is the same as your fiscal year, you can just do all. But in this case, I'm just going to do financial. Well, in my case, I'm lucky that I've got both. Mine are the same, so I'm going to leave it as all. But you can choose which one you want to do. So this, the receivables year-end does print a report, so you can print that out if you like, and it just gives you a summary of everything that's been changed. So it's giving you the final year-to-date and the last year in life-to-date before you've done the close. And it does that for each of your debtors. So it could be a considerably long report. So I don't recommend you physically print it, but perhaps send it to a PDF or something, just for safekeeping. Okay, so it can't be reprinted. That's just something you need to be a little bit careful of. If you have salespeople set up, it'll also do a year-end for salespeople as well. So if you've got year-to-date and life-to-dates, it'll also reset them to 0, the year-to-dates to 0, and update your life-to-date. Same thing for territory, sales territory. And that completes the receivables year-end. Now, if you've done receivables, chances are payables will be very, very straightforward, because it's essentially the same recommendations pre-year-end, and also the same process for doing the actual process, the year-end process. So once again, you post all the batches you've got for purchasing. Once again, if you've got open purchase orders, you don't need to receive them. You don't need to cancel them or anything like that. They can stay, and you can receive them in the new fiscal year. No problems there. Okay, so there's your series post, and you just want to make sure all your batches are that relate to the previous fiscal year. We recommend that you post them. If you've created new batches for the new financial year, that's fine. You don't have to post them if you don't want to, and it's not going to crash GP or anything like that, or it's not going to give you any errors. The only thing, of course, is if you're looking at year-to-date and life-to-date and you haven't done the year-end, no balance brought forwards. That's the only limitation of just going ahead and transacting the next day in the new fiscal year. Alright, so if you feel it's necessary, do your pre-year-end backup and your post-year-end backup and close your fiscal periods. And the actual routine is base routines, year-end close. So once again, you've got the option between financial and calendar. I'm going to run both in my case, but obviously in most of your cases, you'll just do financial. And very similar reports to receivables. It gives you the information, the final bit of information before you transfer to the new fiscal year. And in terms of what payables updates, very, very similar to receivables. There's some inquiry windows and some smart lists that use year-to-date, life-to-date information. So we've got, let's see, which is a good one here to use, creditor yearly. Yep, this is a good one. So once again, we can see our year-to-date and life-to-date, and last year should then get updated. And you can do that for each, you can look at each of the creditors. So if I do 2018, it should actually do a swap. There we go. Okay, so you'll see that because we've done the year-end close, there's nothing in year-to-date. So once again, if you're not using those inquiry windows or those fields in Smart List that refer to year-to-dates and life-to-dates, you can get away with it if you don't do payables. And of course, if you're not using the payables module, you don't have to do the year-end at all. Again, rare, but I have seen it. But now the next module, though, is compulsory if you are using the module, fixed assets. If you're not, again, if you're not using fixed assets within GP, you don't have to worry about this. But if you are, the year-end is compulsory. And the reason it's compulsory is because your fixed assets book relies on the year-to-date and life-to-date depreciation being accurate. So before you do the fixed assets, we recommend that you do the payables year-end first. And then these are very important. Make sure all your assets have been put into your register and depreciate them up to and including the last day of your fiscal year. That is very important. So if I go into the fixed assets module and I do that, we've got depreciate. So I'm going to put 31st of the 12th, put everything in there, and we're going to depreciate. So that is a must, because otherwise your year-to-date and life-to-date depreciate, well, especially your year-to-date, will be completely inaccurate. So the other thing you want to make sure of is that your fixed assets calendar is built and set up correctly. Now, if you have normal months, in terms of your fiscal year, you have normal months, just normal 12 clean months, normally your calendar should be clean from the day that it was set up. But a lot of you might have 445 fiscal periods, and some of you might even have 13 or 14 periods. So when you build a calendar, when you build your fixed assets calendar, you can set up what your date range is for your current year, but then for future years, GP will automatically it will look at what you've set up and try and replicate it for the future fiscal years and even previous ones. Now, of course, they may not necessarily be correct. So what you want to do is make sure that your calendar has been readjusted to cater for the next fiscal year. So once again, if you're using 12 clean months, you don't have to worry about that. It's only if you're using 445 or anything, any sort of unusual period set up. If you're using 52 weeks, that should also be okay, because that's a clean 7 days progression. So under Utilities, you've got Build Calendar, and what you want to do is, once you've set up what you want to do is, obviously you've got your fiscal year set up from the front end, which is over here. So you want to make sure the new fiscal year is set up to reflect your, if it's not your 12 clean months, that it's your correct period set up, whether it's, again, 445 or 13 periods, 14 periods, whatever it may be. And then if you click on Replace, it will resynchronize your fixed assets calendar to reflect that. So that's actually part of the year-end, the fixed assets year-end process, that you want to make sure your fixed assets calendar is always in sync with your main fiscal period setup window. So I can do that. I can run that now. Okay, and it will print out. It won't actually print out a report, but you can do an inquiry and do a verification to make sure that there's no gaps. And if you get something like this, okay, then you know that you're in a position to continue. The only time you might get a warning message is, again, if you've not done your synchronization, it might say that a certain part of your period is missing or out of sync. So it does warn you. And the year-end process for fixed assets is actually quite quick. Even if you have 25,000 assets or even 95,000 assets, you'll be surprised how quick the year-end process is for fixed assets. So you can see here we've got our books, and our fiscal period is set to 2017. I'm just going to insert them. Now there's no report, but it's very quick. Once the window is closed, it's essentially done. So even, as I said, even if you have 90,000 assets, it'll be probably maybe just take a few extra seconds. That's about it. And now for the big one, the most important one of them all, General Ledger. So it's always good to close all the other modules first, highly recommended. If you know any adjusting entries, put them in, but don't panic if you don't have them or you have to do adjustments after you've done the year-end. I will talk about that. Another important thing to do is print an account list to verify the posting type. That means, is the account balance sheet or is it a P&L? The quickest way to do that is a smart list. So if we go to accounts, it should display all the chart of accounts for you, and you want to make sure, if I do a search, and this is just one way of doing it, but we'll do a search and say, show me everything that's balance sheet. And then what you can do, hopefully your account numbers are set up in a way that you can, either your natural account or one of your segments can also represent that it's a balance sheet. So if I do a sort, we can see, with the exception of this top one, that everything between in my case, everything between 1,000 and 3,000 is set up indeed as a balance sheet. I don't have any P&Ls. But you would want to change them or review the account, and it could be legitimate if something's set up as a P&L, but you must review it to make sure that that's what you want it to be. Because of course the posting type determines whether your P&L gets rolled up to 0, or if it's a balance sheet, it rolls over into the amount rolls over to the next fiscal year. So it's very important that you check that. Especially if you don't trust your other users when they're creating their own GL codes, this is definitely something I would recommend, because it's a very easy mistake to make when setting up a new account. I used to be a GP user, and I'll openly admit that I've made that mistake. So this is your posting type here. So that's all, very important that you got that set up correctly. Now, when it talks about verifying the settings in the GL setup window, what that means is you're checking that the retained earnings account that you've nominated is the correct one. So if I go down to my setup and I select General Ledger, there's my retained earnings account. You want to make sure, that that's the account that you want to send all your P&Ls and you want to consolidate all your P&L accounts into at the end of the year. So if it's wrong, you need to correct that. So that's something else that you need to check. Okay, you can also, not compulsory, but recommended that you print out your detailed GL trial balance, also any financial statements, so that you can do a quick comparison pre and post year end. And in this case, I would definitely recommend you do one final backup before doing the year-end process, at least just for General Ledger on its own. So if you don't want to do backups for any of the other sub-modules, at least do it for this one. And the window for that is under Routines. There's year-end there. Oops, sorry, that's the assets one. There it is there. So there's our retained earnings account. And you can see that we're still in year 2017, so when I close the year, it's going to move it to 2018. And it shows you the last closing date as well. And now we just press Close Year. If you have unposted batches, it will warn you. But as I said, if you do have batches that are not meant to be posted yet, do not panic. I will cover that. So this process, depending on your volume of data, can take anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 hours or even 3 hours. So if you have a very large database, do be patient. If you want to let it run overnight and then come back to it in the morning, as long as you're sure no one's going to kill your session overnight, you are more than welcome to leave it running overnight. And the same thing applies for when you're doing check links and things like that. If they take forever and you don't want to sit there watching your screen, you can always do them overnight. So this is the year-end closing report, and it shows you all the balances that have been transferred to retained earnings, and it shows you all of the individual revenue and expense accounts that have been affected. If you've got foreign currencies, it's also going to display the amounts in the originating currencies. Now this report is not reprintable, so please keep it for either as a soft copy, it's a PDF, or you can physically print it and store it somewhere. Now, if you've done a year-end process and you've realized, oh no, I have to do an adjustment in GL, do not panic. You can do it. So if I need to go and do a general journal, first of all, I'll make sure that that last period in 2017 is open. So we'll come back in here and I'll just untick that one, so that if I need to do a journal, so I'm going to select the P&L account just so something comes up. Okay. Accrued expenses. That's fine. Okay. Just ignore this pop-up window. I've got another module that's making that come up, but that won't be doing that on your side. So I'm going to just assign mine to a batch. Now you'll see I've only entered 2 lines, but when I do a print preview, and it'll also do the same thing when I post it. It'll show the same thing when I post it. But when I do a print preview, it's going to show you, it's actually not going to show you 2 lines. It's going to show you 4 lines. Now hopefully this report comes up. I don't know why it's taking so long. Could be that it just doesn't like me. There you go. But no, it did finally cooperate, and you'll see that there are actually 4 lines. But some people panic and say, oh no, it's duplicated it. No, it hasn't. It hasn't duplicated anything. You'll see the first 2 lines are the 2 lines that I've entered. But then have a look at the next 2 lines. You'll see that it's rolled the amount automatically into my retained earnings, and it's also made a balance brought forward for my accrued expenses, which is a balance sheet account. I didn't open the tax period, that's why I'm getting that error message, but that doesn't stop us from viewing this information here. The only thing that's going to do is prevent me from posting this batch. But whether you look at it as a preview or you post it, it deceivingly looks like it's doubling up, but it's not. It's creating the rollover adjustment for you automatically, which is what you want it to do. You want your retained earnings to be updated if necessary, because I'm sure you all have audit adjustments that need to be entered after you've done a year-end close. So this is just these slides are a breakdown of what I've just spoken about. I sort of jumped ahead and spoke before actually going through the slides. I do apologize. I should make note that that we will be sending out detailed year-end documents to everyone on our list. We have a list in CRM with some primary contacts. We will be sending out year-end documents. So if you've missed anything on this webinar, or you need to read up about it afterwards, the year-end document will be something you can refer to. So after you've done the year-end process, of course, it'd be a good idea to run your GL trial balance and also any key financial year reports, P&Ls or balance sheet reports that you've created, and just make a quick comparison to make sure that your balances are correct. Okay, and if you want, you can do one final backup, a complete year-end backup before you start transacting in the new year. But again, not compulsory, just recommended. Most of you will have scheduled nightly backups running anyway, so it's not something you normally need to do manually. Now, one last part before I conclude the session is for anyone who's using analytical accounting. I don't have it installed, but I can show you the screenshots that you need if you need to run the year-end for analytical accounting, because analytical accounting does have a separate year-end procedure. Okay, now if you are doing a year-end closing for analytical accounting, it's a good idea to be logged in as SA, and this guarantees any permission errors are removed, so or eliminated as it's written here. Now, if you use, this is for GP, this webinar is for GP 2010, but just in case anyone is using an earlier version, if you're using GP 10 Service Pack 2 or above, you can also consolidate your AA transaction data, which creates balance forward, brought forward entries, which is good if you're doing that sort of detailed AA reporting. Now, if you are using AA and you've never done a year-end process for it, you're more than welcome to contact someone from our help desk or request a consultant to assist you with it, because it can be a little bit, depending on the number of transaction dimensions you have, it can be a little bit scary at first. But in terms of what the windows look like, they're not so scary. So this is a screenshot. If you have it installed, you will see it in your as you see it here. If you don't have it installed or you're not using it, this part is not relevant. But there is a utility called under Utilities Financial Analytical Accounting. Move data to history. So it's not moving, it's actually just called move data to history. It's like an archiving process. So you can choose whether you want to transfer the detail to history, or whether you want to do a consolidation first, which is where it creates balance brought forwards. at the same time. Or if you just want to do a preview of what it's going to do, you can just do a print transfer preview report on its own without actually doing the process. Okay, so that's just a little bit of, that's the explanations there for you. Okay, so we've said that you can either transfer the detail as it is to history, to a historical year, and the second one does a consolidation of all the balances first and then creates a balanced brought forward figure, which is probably the one I'd recommend that you do, or the third one if you just want to do a preview. Now, in terms of when you do the AA year-end process, you can do it after the GL one, but if you want to always leave GL to the very end, it's probably better, and you can do it just before the GL. So if you find that you're not on the contact list for getting the year-end document, or you just want some more assistance on the year-end process in general, you can either contact your account manager with PA, or you can contact our help desk on the number that you see there, and you can also send an email to them. So they can either take you through it over the phone, or if it turns out to be a very long process, they can organise a consultant to come out and assist you with it. So now we've come to the Q&A stage, if anyone does have any questions and answers. Okay, so feel free to type them into the chat area. And we do have one question. We'll be also sending a recording of this webinar out to all of you tomorrow, once it's been edited and all the parts where I've had that little bit of downtime has been chopped out, so it makes me look better. But there was a question that the question was, do we need to take notes, or will we be given the PowerPoint notes? As I said, you'll be given a recording. And you'll also get the documentation that I mentioned earlier, which is far more detailed than these slides.
Question from front of it.
The reconcile utility can. Reconcile utility is done by year, but Checklinks does everything. So yes, it does. I do acknowledge that it can take a lot of time. So for Checklinks, you don't have to do it all in one day. What you can do is run the Checklinks, say, overnight, a few days before, let it do its thing, as long as you know no one's going to kill the session in between, so that the only thing you have to worry about is doing the actual year end. You don't have to be logged in as SA to do the Checklinks. If you are set up as a power user, what's called a power user, there's a security role within GP called power user. You can then you can run Checklinks as that user. Okay, the next question is: would inactive accounts with balances be cleared at the year-end procedure? No, only inactive accounts with zero balances will be cleared. Inactive accounts with balances will be kept. Okay, the next question that's come up: is there a separate process for opening periods in FRX, or are they open once they are created and opened in GP? You don't actually create any periods from FRX. They are created in GP. So if you do need to create a fiscal year, that is, it's in the fiscal period setup where I was before. So let's say I want to create, I've got 2018. But let's say before I do the year-end process for that, I want to create 2019. I actually just type it in, nominate my first day and my last day, press calculate. I've got an error on my side, but hopefully you won't get that sort of message. But it will create the fiscal periods for you, and then you'll be able they'll get picked up in FRX automatically. Okay. Do unit accounts roll forward with zero balance, or is the balance carried forward? That's actually a very good question. The ability to choose whether they roll forward or not is actually being introduced in GP 2013, but in GP 2010 they roll forward automatically. So, there's a question that was I might have missed. Can you run check links and reconcile a few days before closing, and then run the year-end, and then again when you close to make it take less time the second time round? No, check links will always take the same amount of time. It's all dependent on volume, data volume. But what you certainly can do is run the check links and reconcile a few days before, and then just do the year-end on its own. If it's only a few days difference, then as long as no one's done any, you've not had any major system crashes or anything in that time, you'll be fine to just do the year-end on its own. Okay, I'm just scrolling through to see if I've missed any other questions. There was actually, the very first question was, does this apply for GP 2013 as well? Yes, it does. Okay, the next, do you need to register if you want to attend the 2013 webinar at 11:30?
Sure. Yes, but if you email me your email addresses, I can send that invitation to you. I'll post what my email address in the chat.
That was my colleague Fraser, if anyone was wondering. I didn't just change my accent to be a charming English one. I'm not very good at that. The next question that's come up is, can we run depreciation for July before year-end close of fixed assets? You have to run depreciation for... actually, no, sorry. My mistake. No, you cannot run depreciation for July before your year-end close. You must do year-end close first. That's a definite must. Do all users need to be logged out when running reconcile and check links? No, but it is highly recommended. There are certain areas where certain tables that may not be able to be run if somebody's in the process, particularly in the sales and inventory side. So very highly recommended. They don't have to be logged out of GP altogether, just the database that you're running the year-end on, or running the check links and reconcile on. Okay, next question is, can we run year-end close for fixed assets a few days prior to the GL year-end close? Absolutely. You can run it 2 months before if you wanted to. We've had clients that they've not run the GL year-end process about 6 months into the new fiscal year. How can you lock out a user of the modules? How can you lock out users? Okay, that depends. If you've got a tool that we normally PA normally provide as a freebie, you don't pay for it. It's called PA System Tools. What you can actually do is nominate which users can't log into GP at all. So if they try to, it locks them out. But if you don't have PA System Tools installed, what your IT can do is restrict the database to just be a single user. So if anyone tries to log on, they'll get a very ugly warning message and they won't be able to continue. So PA System Tools, if you've got it installed, and if you don't, it's a freebie. Like you don't have to buy the module. It can just be sent to you if you want it. So a help desk can do that for you. Or get your IT to do a restriction behind the scenes, a single user restriction. Does anyone else have any other questions that they'd like to share? I'll just give it a few moments because there might be a bit of a delay. Do backups need to be done before reconcile and check links? Only if you want to. It also purely depends on how long your reconcile and check links normally takes. If it only takes a few seconds, and then no, it's not really necessary. It's all, again, all really dependent on your data volume. So it's recommended but not compulsory. Okay, I haven't seen any more questions come up, so we might wrap it up now, if that's okay with everybody. I'd like to apologise in advance for the early technical difficulties that we had. But apart from that, thank you very much for your patience and listening to the webinar, and we'll speak to some of you very soon, I'm sure. Have a good rest of the day, and thank you.